because instead of being at the office, we're out on a location at C&J Sporting Goods in Bethany. And it's just going to make us a little disoriented a little bit. But I'm with All Phase Real Estate, and I talk about all kinds of random stuff. I do try to focus a lot on real estate things and how landlords can do better, for the clientele that they have, and how the tenants can actually be better tenants, and do better tenants make better landlords would be a really good question, and we've covered that several times. This week, since it's graduation week and there's so many graduations going on, I know that I have two Friday, and there's been several of them that already have been happening. We're going to talk a lot about the graduating classes and different things that are happening with the graduating classes. And basically, as a landlord, and we talked a lot about this last week, it's a good opportunity for you to invest in the future of some of these kids coming out of college, or even out of high schools, because they're first time renters a lot of the times, especially if they're coming out of high schools and then they're going into college. Usually when they're going into college, they may not be renting their first place on their own. Their parents may be co-signing or helping them out with that. But the number of people that come out of high schools each year, some of those, and there's certain percentages that we talked about last week, go into college and stay in the dorms the first year, and then there's a certain number of them that come out and become first-time renters. There's a percentage, of course, that stays with their parents in their parents' home, but the numbers are kind of a little bit mind-boggling. So when I looked at the research last week, the National Center for Education said that there's about 131,000 students in the state of Oklahoma, and then the Oklahoma website says that there are more than that. So when you break that down to the percentages that we looked at last week, about 38 to 40,000 of these kids coming out of high school even will actually become renters, first-time renters with no rental history, no verifiable long-term job history, not any of the criteria that you usually want when you're looking at a person to rent to them. But it is a good opportunity, especially if you have efficiencies or one bedrooms, and you're looking to fill that last 2 or 3% of your occupancy. You may have some specials for these kids coming out, or you may look at some different criteria. For fair housing situations, you as a landlord know that you have to have the same criteria for all people. But first-time renters, you've got to try to give them a little bit of a break, because how are they going to be gaining their rental history if someone doesn't give them the opportunity to rent? Now, that is a risk. I mean, you may have to have them have a cosigner or pay a higher deposit, but you might look at a lot of different things. So, that's a good situation if you have that and have the flexibility to be able to do that. A lot of times when kids are coming out of high school, they did not get taught how to do the things that they need to do to become a first-time renter. They haven't saved up any money, and a lot of times they haven't made a budget. One of the things that we talked about last week was it may be part of your criteria that you put a sample budget or a budget that a person could fill in attached to your application, and have them fill out and turn that in as part of their process of their being approved for your apartment complex or their house that you're renting, especially if you're a private landlord and you need to have some flexibility and some more information, because you want to get that person that you're renting to in the mindset that they have to pay their rent first. And one of the things that I talked about was on this, just simple spreadsheet or simple worksheet, having the due dates of their other bills set up so that they can fill those things in. And if their car payment is due on a certain date, it's a little bit easier for them to move the date of the car payment than it is to do a specialized rent due date for them, and so you might discuss that with them. So there's these things that they need to budget for and they need to plan for that they may not have been taught. Now, one of the other things that we talked about was, kind of in life, you kind of learn from your parents and you kind of go the direction that you've been taught. A lot of times doctors' kids become doctors or lawyers' kids become lawyers, and my daughters went into real estate. So sometimes people learn from their parents and they kind of get guided in certain directions. And that same thing happens to their spending habits and their saving habits and their responsibility financially. If you have a mother or father who does do budgeting and does saving and is responsible with their money, you're going to learn a little bit more about that than you have a parent kind of like me that was a little willy-nilly, and I made all my payments, but I didn't necessarily make sure that everything was paid on the first. I, paid it on payday. Or I might have an expense that was a little bit over budget, but we spread it out and things like that. If you have a parent that doesn't necessarily care about the rent on the first and you're constantly seeing an eviction notice, or if you're constantly living with the electricity being turned off or the water being shut off, you might learn that that is normal behavior or a normal way to live, and it wouldn't alarm you as much as it would a person who didn't have to face those kind of things in life because their parents were fiscally responsible or financially disciplined. And so that's one of the things that that's kind of learned through life. It's not anything that you can really learn in school. I'm sure that there's economic classes and there's things that they do teach about that. But, that's something that's, like I said, it's one of those things that you might be inheriting from your parents. But on the same side of that, if you have extremely irresponsible parents, you may go the direction of, oh, I'm going to be a responsible student and I'm going to be a responsible financial person when I get out on my own, because you've learned not to want to live with that kind of stress. So that's kind of really important. Like we were talking about, when kids come out of high school and they are maybe going into college, there's only a certain number of beds available or dorms available, and then after that, a lot of the students will have to go out and rent off campus housing. And if a college is requiring that first year student to live on campus, they will take precedent over second and third year students, so that second and third year student may have to go off and be a first time renter as well. And so that's why it's important as a landlord for you to learn how to market to these first time renters or graduating students and learn how to accommodate them, learn how to capture that business, because that's a market that not a lot of people are really going after, and that's really important. So one of the things you need to do is if you're trying to market to students, market in the places that you know they're going to look. We'll talk some more about that. Um, you know, teach the students that if they're going to be a first-time renter, have your guidelines spelled out very clearly. A student, you need to get a copy of that, take it home, research it, have your parents explain it to you, and understand the criteria clearly and fully before you waste your money on an application fee that's not going to be approved. You might go back and ask that landlord questions. What if I don't have 2 years worth of job history? Will you take something from a high school coach or a reference letter from the principal of the school? Are there things that you can do to accommodate me? Or you might be running into a student that really did work for the last 2 years part-time throughout their high school. So are you going to take a part-time job that's now turned into a full-time job as their part of your criteria, because it does show that their consistency? So there's things like that that people need to learn. And then for students, they need to understand that most landlords require 3 times the rent in income so that you will be able to basically pay your bills. And you have to prove that. So, how do you prove it? You prove it through rent and through pay stubs, through tax returns or bank statements, or you're not going to be able to do that. So, you might ask for what their alternate solution to that is. Some landlords only require a minimum of 1 year's worth of job history, and that's a lot in today's society. Why some students will stay at home with their parents throughout that first summer and that first year, and then eventually move on. So that's just something that you need to learn that, and whether you're a landlord or a student, you need to figure out how to communicate with that landlord or with that student to see if there is some leeway or a way to accommodate each other. So be prepared as a student coming out looking for a place to be. Be prepared to provide your ID, your your transcript to show that you were a student that did do well in school. There's a lot of times that you don't really quite understand that there's a lot of non-refundable fees for screening, and you don't want to go from place to place just to be denied. One of the things that you might also look at if you're a student and it's your first time, you might look at a roommate situation, but you have to also understand that there's occupancy limits that landlords do adhere to, and landlords need to understand that the occupancy limits should adhere to state and federal guidelines, which is typically 2 persons per bedroom plus one. So they can't necessarily say that you can't put 4 people in a 2 bedroom house or apartment because that's not federal guidelines. Now, do they want to do that? Yes, they probably do, but that's something that you need to take into consideration. As a first time renter, or as a landlord to a first time renter, your lease needs to be easily understood so that that first time renter can take a copy of your lease, read it, learn it, take it home to their parents and let their parents look at it, or maybe a trusted school counselor or a teacher, so that they fully understand that those leases are very important and very serious. Um, so, as a landlord, you don't want to lose or miss this very large number of potential clients. So, give them a chance and let them know what your expectations are. And actually, that might make you happy to have the full units. Um, like I said, there's a lot of different things that you can help them walk through that. If you have a good leasing agent that works with you, you might make it a requirement in your company that when a person comes in to fill out an application, your leasing agent sits down with that person and walks them through helping them fill that out. Now, you are going to be faced with some people don't want your help to fill it out. That's sometimes a problem, but that also is sometimes because they don't want to give you all the information that's really correct. But that is the opportunity to get as much information as possible so that you can make a good decision as to whether or not you want to take a chance on that person. And realistically, it doesn't just go for kids coming out of school or first time renters. Anytime you have an applicant that's filling out an application, you need to make sure they fill it in as completely and as honestly as you can. I'll give you an example. This past week, Amanda had an application in one of our properties, and the lady was quite obviously not giving all the information. But to be able to follow up on that, you had to really dig deep. And you got to know, if you're a first time renter, your landlord is going to dig deep and look for things, did you have some incidents? Do you have a lot of speeding tickets? Things like that that would show them that you're not responsible, because you are being entrusted with a very valuable asset that's very important to them, and you need to be known as a trustworthy person. So that's just part of it when you're coming out of high school. And for landlords, landlords want to rent to you, but they want to be able to rent to you in good conscience that they're not making a mistake. In the landlording business, there is a common statement that we all make, and we say it several times a week. No good deed goes unpunished, and we're going to get more to that when we get back from our first break.
Rooted in trust and built on smiles, Boone Reeves Orthodontics is your local specialist for both adults and children. Serving Bethany and all of OKC with their exceptional skill, Dr. Boone and Dr. Reeves are eager to see you. Book your next appointment by calling 405-367-8147 or stop by 7221 Northwest 23rd Street, Unit CD in Bethany. Boone Reeves Orthodontics utilizes state-of-the-art equipment and a wealth of medical knowledge to ensure your smile shines like never before. Congratulations to this year's Bethany High Senior Class, and remember Boone Reeves Orthodontics when it's time to schedule your next appointment.
From Yonkers, New York to Bethany, Oklahoma, Angelo's Italian Deli at 6639 Northwest 36th Street offers a genuine Italian flavor that makes you feel right at home. Angelo's Italian Deli features fresh ingredients, daily specials, and a hometown environment that can't be replicated.
Welcome to Angelo's Italian Deli in Bethany. Come on down for the fresh sandwiches, pizzettes, which are individual pizzas, fresh sandwiches, salads, desserts. Please come on by. Beautiful coffee shop.
With a catering service that can take care of any event, large or small, you'll want to call Angelo's for your next meal. Call 405-441-5842 or stop by 6639 Northwest 36th Street in Bethany. And always remember, Angelo's caters any event. 405-441-5842.
Stephanie's Vintique and the Plaster Paint Company is all Oklahoma made at 3821 Asbury in Bethany, featuring vintage, chalk paint, antiques, clothing, vegan soaps and lotion, homemade cards, decor, and furniture. And space is available for rent to start your own business at Stephanie's Vintique and Plaster Paint Company. Call 405-249-3604 and see why people are coming from all over the metro for this paint and decor. Or you can visit us at theplasterpaintcompany.com and also see us on Facebook. Stephanie's Vintique and Plaster Paint Company in Bethany. Start your Vintique experience.
At the home of the Gotta Have It, you'll find Apple Tree Antique Gallery, located in the heart of downtown Bethany at 6740 Northwest 39th Expressway. Enjoy spacious shopping with up to 77 unique vendors across more than 10,000 square feet, offering everything from jewelry and clothing to one-of-a-kind treasures and so much more. Don't miss our third Friday weekend specials every month. And yes, we're open Sundays. Call us at 495-0602. Apple Tree Antique Gallery in Bethany, home of the Gotta Have It.
You don't have to look very far to find a dependable roofing contractor because Myers Roofing is committed to quality roofing systems, excellent customer service, and is all local right here in Bethany. Myers Roofing is licensed, insured, and all work is guaranteed. You can rely on Myers Roofing to take care of your next roofing project, and once you do, you'll understand why our customers keep coming back. Residential roofing, commercial roofing, specialty, tile, maintenance, and repair. Myers Roofing does it all. Call 405-787-7433. That's 405-787-7433.
C&J Sporting Goods at 6604 Northwest 38th Street has been serving Bethany and the Metro for over 30 years, with 3 generations ready to serve you with the best shopping experience of product knowledge and customer service anywhere, with a wide selection of guns, ammo, ear and eye protection, law enforcement equipment, hunting, camping, and survival gear. If they don't have it, they will order it for you. Veteran owned and family operated. Call 405-789-8102. C&J Sporting Goods.
Trying to say 2 words at once. And I am coming to you today from C&J Sporting Goods over in Bethany. And we are having such a wonderful chilly day. We can't even believe this. This weather won't even stay warm enough. But there's a lot of graduations happening this time of year, and that's primarily what we're talking about today. And I'm going to give, some graduating students some guidelines and some tips on coming out and trying to get out and be on their own and trying to rent their first place. One of the things that's really important is, when you get your first place, you've got your own rules. Nobody's telling you to clean your room and turn down the music or take out the trash until that landlord calls you, and then you could really get in trouble. So when you do go to rent, make sure that you know what the guidelines are and what the rules are, because your first apartment and going through all of the stuff that you have to go through to get that first apartment, you have to budget, you have to save, you have to, put your rental history up to be a starting point so that you can get to the point where you don't have to pay higher deposits or be scrutinized as much. So that's extremely important to you in life. Coming out of high school, you've had it kind of easy. You're not really in the real world yet. But now, especially if you're going out to get your first apartment, you're entering into adulthood. Whether you rent an apartment or go off to college, you're right there on that door of having more responsibilities than you really want, and having to be an adult and having to act like an adult, which means being responsible, saving your money, being safe, keeping a clean house, and making sure that you're building the kind of future that you can be proud of and that it doesn't come back to bite you later on. Um, Rental history, just like your job history, is one of the foundations that you're standing on right now that can either crumble and fall, or it can be solid for the rest of your life. For your successful adult life, having solid foundations in certain things is extremely important. If you have a bad first rental history or a bad roommate situation, that can really follow you for a long time. I'm going to give you a little bit of example of that is that, if you're in a roommate situation and your roommate flakes out on you and leaves, and as a result, you cannot afford to rent the place that you're in, and it ultimately either goes to eviction or something bad happens, both tenants or both people on that lease will be having actions brought against them either in small claims court with both names on it, or on your credit reports where it's reported on both of you. If you're the person that moved away because of whatever reason, and you told the guy, hey, look, find a different roommate, or you told the girl, hey, find a different roommate, I've got to move on, my parents want me to come back home, there's all these reasons why I can't stay, I've lost my job, whatever the case may be, you're still responsible unless you get your name off that lease. And if that person that you left in charge doesn't handle that financial responsibility that you've dropped in their lap, well, it'll bite both of you, and it will be hard on you moving through your 20s and can follow you into your 30s. It can also affect your credit rating and how high your credit score is. And if you're going out to buy a new car, that's affected by your rental history. If you're looking for a job, sometimes your credit score is affecting you getting a good job. So these are things that you need to know about before you mess them up. So first of all, I'm going to be having a lot of notes, but you need to understand up front that what renting an apartment really means. You pay rent, you live here. Yeah, that's what it means sort of to you, but what it really means is that you are legally and financially responsible to that landlord. When you sign a lease, that is a legal binding contract. You can't get out of that unless there's some kind of mutual termination for various different reasons. And there are things that people do to try to get out of it. But the landlord's used to that. And the landlord doesn't want that turnover and doesn't want the responsibility and the cost to re-rent the unit, and there's a lot of financial things that the landlord gets affected by, so they're going to want you to fulfill your legal obligation. It's not something that they're going to just let you out of lightly. So one of the things that you need to do, like I said, get that budget. You need to think about before you even go look for an apartment, what can you afford? Do not base your decision for a rental on where you are living in your parents' house. One of the things that people do is their parents had a certain standard of living and they got used to that standard of living, and they don't want to lower that just because they can't afford that 3-bedroom or that fancy 2-bedroom or that nicer neighborhood or that fancy apartment community with all of the amenities. You have to base it on what can you afford. You have to think about, what can I give up that I have to give up because I don't have the money for the granite countertops and I don't have the money for the place with the pool. Just because you want luxury and you're used to luxury, you may not be able to do that. Rents are higher today and they're going to continuously go up. it is very difficult to even maintain an apartment on your own. And then on top of that, you'll have electricity, water, of course, your internet, because you're not going to give up your PlayStation and your gaming. And then, of course, there's renter's insurance, which is definitely important. And if you've not had a situation where you've had to use your insurance, maybe on your car insurance or anything like that, you don't really realize that in an apartment where there's a lot of other people around, if something happens, and it may not even be your fault, maybe one of your neighbors had a situation, their candle caught the Christmas tree on fire and the house burnt down and it smoked up your apartment or burned up some of your things, or the water damage from putting the fire out totally destroyed everything you own and all your electronics. If you do not have renter's insurance, you're out of luck. You could sue the neighbor. They may not have the money any more than you did. You could try to sue the landlord, but they're not responsible for it. And so even if they have a sprinkler system that comes on automatically and ruins all of your electronic devices, then they're not responsible for that if they did not negligently cause the fire, in which most landlords really are careful about not being negligent. So that's something that you need to insure your stuff when you're living out on your own. There's groceries and gas and your phone bill, your furniture. You either got to buy furniture or rent furniture, and you do not know, as a landlord, how many times I have seen that rental furniture company come and pick up that rental furniture that you've had for 6 months because you paid your bill on that last because you were paying your car payments or your internet or all your electricity or the other things. So you might want to think about buying some good used furniture, or maybe grandma's got some that she'll give you for that first apartment. Maybe you start thinking about buying all of the things that you're going to need, like dishes and cups and pots and pans and lamps and all towels and linens way before that. Maybe that's something that you're buying with your summer job before you go out and get that first apartment. You've got laundry, whether you've got a washer and dryer in the unit or you have to go to the laundromat. You still got to wash your clothes or take them home to mama. So, there's the deposits, and then there's always those little things that you don't expect. There's the emergencies. So maybe your transmission goes out or you need a new tire and things like that. You cannot go to your landlord and say, look, I need a new tire. They're going to say, well, I don't know what to tell you. You should have a savings account for that because your rent is due and I cannot wait till the end of the month, because if you can't pay it this month, there's an old saying in the rental industry, if you can't pay 1 month's rent, you for sure can't pay 2 months' rent. And if you pay it at the end of the month, then immediately the next month is due, and your landlord's going to be in this constant cycle of having to chase after you for the rent. So guess what's going to happen? When it comes up for your renewal, they're either not going to renew you. If you want to move, they're not going to give you good rental history. If you go try to apply for something and that person calls to get your payment history, they're not going to lie for you, and you would not believe the number of people that will call me up and say, hey, look, I'm going to get a payday loan to buy a new tire or whatever. Could you tell the loan officer that I pay my rent on time every month? Landlords aren't going to do that. They cannot do that. It's not fair to ask them. One of the things that you need to do, and before you even get out to go rent, is think about saving some money up first. Have some money set aside in a savings account for those emergencies, and don't touch it unless there is an emergency. We talk about this all the time. All of the things that that are going to show up as an emergency later and there's no money for it, you cannot tell that landlord, I'm sorry, I just can't pay my rent. So those are some things you need to think about for that first time rental. Also, and I say this almost, I would think, in almost every show, if you're going to go out and rent something, read the lease before you sign it, word by word by word. The number of people that I have had over the years that I had to either read the lease to them because they wouldn't, or say, look, you need to read that. Do you understand that? Ask them questions about it. As a good landlord, they will do that. But as a bad landlord, they're just going to let you sign it. They don't care if you care about what's in that lease, but they're going to hold you to each and every rule that they have. And that brings us to another thing. Rules and regulations. That's a part of the lease. Doing your move-in inspection. knowing what the pet policies are, because that could cost you big time. Knowing what the guest rules are, knowing what the noise policies are, knowing all that stuff is in the lease. And we're going to get back to some more things that you need to remember back from this break.
Stan's Plumbing is your locally owned, full-service, licensed and bonded plumbing company, proudly serving the Oklahoma City Metro for over 30 years. Stan's provides all types of plumbing services like faucet and toilet repairs, sewer repair and trenchless pipe replacement, water heater repair and installation, both tank and tankless, plus drain cleaning and jetting. All plumbers arrive with fully stocked trucks and can resolve your plumbing problems in a timely manner. Since 1988, Stan's Plumbing has held itself to a higher standard in plumbing. Call 405-721-5100 to schedule your appointment. Stan's Plumbing, Valley Service in a dirty business. 405-721-5100.
Name brands and more for less at Victory Mattress Outlet. Welcome to Victory Mattress Outlet, 7101 Northwest Expressway in Oklahoma City. Family owned and operated Victory Mattress Outlet has options for every budget, like quality 10-inch beds to high-end luxury mattresses fit for a king. You're the winner here. Shop pillows, protectors, bedroom sets, and more. And remember, the friendly people at Victory Mattress Outlet can help deliver, assemble, and set up your mattresses and furniture. Call 405-510-6988 and never pay retail price for top brands again. Victory Mattress Outlet, 7101 Northwest Expressway, 405-510-6988. That's 405-510-6988. Victory Mattress Outlet, where your best night's sleep costs less.
Hi, I'm Trinity. I'm with Red River Credit Corporation. I've been with the loan service for about 2 years. We'd love to help you with your auto or signature loans. We are located at 1081 South Cornwall Drive in Suite 401, Yukon, Oklahoma. Our phone number is 405-354-1930. We offer no credit checks on our clear and free title. Our title loans are a quick service, no credit check needed. Just come in with your vehicle and your title and we get you taken care of. We offer electronic closing. If you're a former borrower or an established loan here, we can help you from the comfort of your house. We're a quick and friendly service and we'd love to meet you for the first time. Stop by and see us today.
This is Blake Nightingale State Farm, your local insurance agent over at 7304 Northwest Expressway. Here to tell you more about the business is Blake himself.
Hi, my name is Blake Nightingale, State Farm insurance agent located at 7304 Northwest Expressway here in Oklahoma City. I've been a State Farm agent since 2018. We've got 5 licensed staff members here, and we do everything from auto, home, life insurance, and health insurance. And we're real passionate about helping people. And we love youth sports, and we sponsor a lot of local teams here. And so, like I always tell people, like a good neighbor, we're here to help you.
Just like you heard from Blake, Blake Nightingale State Farm is here to help you protect what's important to you, because your car and home aren't just things. They're where you make your memories. Visit Blake and his friendly staff at 7304 Northwest Expressway and call them at 405-728-1313. Like a good neighbor, Blake Nightingale is there.
We kind of want to show off our trailer today. We offer a lot of services all around the metro. We go within 130 miles.
Recently did a house that was 70 to 80 feet. We did it in 2 days, no trouble shooting it. We were in and out, make sure the customer was really happy with the work.
With liner, it's trenchless, it's headacheless. Any old cast iron, any orange bird, any clay pipe that's pre-existing inside or outside, we can go in and completely reline the inside of that pipe. It turns it all into one solid pipe. You never have to worry about root intrusions. You never have to worry about settling or bellying. Overall, it's a really good product. Everything comes guaranteed. We do make it as trenchless and as headacheless as possible for you guys. Thank you.
Nobody gives you more. We have great news for you today, folks. Toro Taxes at 5909 Northwest Expressway, Suite 249 can help with all your tax refund needs. Toro Taxes specializes in helping our community get the maximum refund possible, and their team of experienced tax professionals guarantees reliable, efficient, personalized services. Call 580-275-8933 and talk to Toro. 100% secure digital and in-person processes with services in both English and Spanish. Schedule your appointment today and let the experts handle your tax return. 5909 Northwest Expressway, Suite 249. Call 580-275-8933. Don't leave money on the table. Toro Taxes.
And this is Sue Jones with All Face Real Estate. I've been a landlord for a long, long time and a real estate broker for a long time as well. And I've learned a lot over the years and been to a lot of classes. And I'm telling you, you got to listen to me. When you are out there and this is your first opportunity, you're graduating, you're excited, you're going to be an adult, and you're going off to really to start your life. The things that you do now are really going to make you or break you. I'm telling you, think about these things. One of the things we talk about is doing that move-in inspection. And when you're doing that move-in inspection, I just did one with a young man that's a college student a couple of weeks ago, and I tell them all, if I have to go out and do it, and I train my managers to do the same thing, walk through the house with them, point out things that aren't perfect, take a picture of it, ask them to take a picture of it, and tell them the only way that you're going to protect yourself from me when you move out is if we have photo documentation of anything that was wrong with this house, because if it's not in the same condition when you hand it back to me as it is today when I'm handing it to you, then you are going to be responsible for that, and I'm definitely going to charge it to you. I don't have a choice. It's not an option. It's just something that is part of the way that it is done. So please take those pictures, do your move-in inspection, and if you have questions or issues, send something over to that landlord. That one that I did the other day, we had gone through the house real well, and they didn't notice it until about a couple of weeks later when they were going ahead and moving their stuff in, that there was some branches and tree limbs and things like that, that when I had the yard done last, the guy didn't snip them off the fence right by the driveway. And when they were driving their fancy car in there, it was, touching and scratching on their side of their car. And so they immediately sent me a picture of it, and by 10 o'clock the next morning, I had somebody out there taking care of that issue. When you're interviewing and you're looking for an apartment or a place to rent as a first-time renter, you need to also do some homework on that landlord. There's apartmentratings.com, and there's a lot of places that you can look at to see what kind of reports people are giving about that landlord. But take those with a grain of salt, please, because a lot of times the people that do post things are just the disgruntled people. They're not the people that are older or, maybe not as computer literate, or they're busy people that don't have time to go out and give you a good review. As a landlord, often you'll have a tenant tell you that you're a good landlord, but they just don't have time to put it on the internet. So talk to that landlord and try to get a good sense of what they would do about a particular situation. What would they do? How to get a hold of them if there's an emergency at night. Do they have a 24-hour line that you can call? These things are really important to you, because a good landlord helps you be a good tenant, and a good tenant helps us be a good landlord. So think about that. We talked about a little bit about a roommate, and if you're out there and you're getting your first place and you're thinking about the roommate situation, choose your roommates carefully. Don't base it on who you had fun with in high school, or who your best friend in high school was, or who parties the best, or, who's cool. Those things don't really necessarily make good roommates. What you need to find is the person that you know that is out looking for a place that they're responsible, they're honest, they're clean, they have a good work ethic, so they're not going to stay at the house while you're out working, and that they have a good amount of emotional maturity, that you can depend on that person to do the things that they need to do. There's nothing worse, I'm telling you, nothing worse than being the good roommate. Coming home and they've slobbed the place out. So the first thing you need to do is go through and pick up all the soda cans and the candy wrappers and the food plates left from the day before, and the dishes are still in the sink and you have to put them in the dishwasher, and there's clothes all over the house. There's nothing worse than being that good roommate, because you're going to get tired of it real quick, and you're going to have that relationship that you had all through high school, and that was your friend, go sour because, yeah, they're a good friend, but they may not be a good roommate. So you need to think about that. That roommate can destroy your rental history, your credit history, cause you legal problems. Think about this. If your roommate does something really crazy, then maybe they break a window out or a door, or maybe they fight with their girlfriend, or they get the police called on them from fighting with their girlfriend. Those are going to be things that follow you as well, so you need to think about that. Maybe they were your best friend in high school and you trust them with everything you've got until you have things that are starting to walk off. Maybe they were trustworthy as long as they weren't sitting next to your wallet. Things like that you really need to take into consideration. You really don't ever know anyone till you've lived with them, till you've shared your bills with them, till you've shared your bathroom with them, till you've shared your responsibilities in your house with them. Then you get to know them real well, and that may not be a person that you necessarily like. So protect your credit. Don't miss your payments. Don't have a roommate that's going to help you be responsible, because you can get irresponsible on your own. You don't need an irresponsible roommate to help you with that. I was doing real good until I got irresponsible roommates, and then things really kind of go south from there. But, then you have to get back on track. Another thing that many young adults really move out without knowing certain things that they really should have learned at home. A lot of times a kid coming out of high school or maybe even out of college does not really know how to cook a simple meal. I have a granddaughter that when she comes to the office and puts that ramen cup in the microwave, you start smelling smoke every time because she leaves it in too long and it catches on fire and it becomes a little bit of a problem. So having a roommate that knows how to cook, or you knowing how to cook, really is an important life skill, because you can't eat from the fast food places all the time. It becomes too expensive. You need to have a roommate, and you need to learn how to clean properly. You would be surprised at the number of people that I'll have come to my office and say, there's these creatures, there's these little white things, there's all these little bugs, and you go into their house, and their house is so dirty. Maybe it's not really cluttered, but it's just dirty, and it's causing roaches or maggots or all kinds of bizarre things. They're not taking out their trash, and so over in that corner where they pile up their trash bags, you get little creatures. So having a roommate, or you learning how to clean properly, is a very important life skill for moving into your first apartment. So knowing how to reset a breaker, knowing how to push the little button on the bottom of the garbage disposal, because if you keep stopping up that garbage disposal and having the maintenance guy come out and have to push that little button every time, they're going to start charging you for that. And it's so easy to do certain things. Change a light bulb, change a filter on your air conditioner. Those are things that you should learn before you move out of your parents' house, but you definitely need to learn that when you're moving into your own place. Another thing that you need to know as a first-time renter is especially if you're moving into an apartment, not so much if you're moving into a house, but for sure if you're moving into an apartment, you're in a very small space with at least 3, maybe 4 walls that are touching someone else's wall. So the things that you're being loud in, your music's too loud in your apartment, that bleeds through to their walls. And so you need to learn to be respectful, because one of the things that is in your lease is the fact that there is restrictions on the noise and the complaints from your neighbors. And the timing, you may be a night person. Maybe you work nights and you come home at 2 o'clock in the morning and flip that TV on, and your neighbor is a person that has to get up at 6 a.m. and every single morning you're in there playing games or fighting with your girlfriend or whatever you're doing. That really is a problem when they complain to the landlord. So just try to curb those things and be aware of your neighbors. Having fights with people in your parking lot, hanging outside in the patio drinking or being a little bit too loud, constant drama, constant police visits. Those are things that are very, very much a problem for your neighbors. Now, one thing in today's society, and landlords have had to learn their ways around having to deal with this. For one thing, for years we've been trying to get people not to smoke in their apartments. Yeah, easy peasy, that's not too bad. It's getting better. Have a little, place outside where they can have their patio, they can have their ashtrays out there, things like that. So you've got to be careful of that. But nowadays, we also are faced with people with medical cards can smoke. You don't really necessarily want them smoking in your apartment, and they are allowed to smoke out on their patio. They are allowed to smoke out by their front door, and the neighbors go nuts about this, especially if they're, maybe they have some smaller children they don't want exposed to that, but they expect you, and they believe somewhere in their infinite wisdom that they're breaking the law, that person is, by smoking in public, but that's not really the case. And you can talk to any police officer in any little town, and they're going to tell you there's not anything that you can do about that. So you have to try to have that either a new addendum to your lease as a landlord, and as a tenant, you might want to talk to the landlord going into that situation and find out what are the guidelines for that if it's not in the lease, about where you can smoke and where you can't smoke. And we're going to talk just about a few more little guidelines when we get back from our next break.
John Campbell is your local health market agent that specializes in Medicare. Instead of talking through an 800 number, talk face-to-face with your local agent, John Campbell, to answer all your questions and find the company that best fits your needs. John Campbell Health Market serves Yukon, Bethany, and the surrounding area and will travel across the state of Oklahoma to meet with you. Call John Campbell Health Markets at 405-200-8414. Call 405-200-8414.
Say aloha to your new favorite shaved ice and coffee shop, Aloha Shaved Ice, on the corner of Northwest 39th Expressway and Council. Aloha brings the summer vibes no matter what the weather looks like outside. Their year-round shaved ice means you get to enjoy classic flavors like grape, strawberry, and cotton candy, while their extensive selection of coffee complements that chill flavor perfectly. Looking for something different? Aloha has specialty drinks for days. Try the Banana Split, Fuzzy Monkey, Spider-Man, or Shrek. And trust us when we say that's only a small part of their specialty lineup. Sharp-eyed visitors may also notice Aloha's local support and drinks like the Bethany Broncos, SNU Crimson Storm, SCU Eagles, and Boomer Sooner. You can enjoy games like chess or Candyland while you dine in the cozy atmosphere, or sit outside and find yourself whisked away to the shore. Kick back with all your friends at Aloha, 8000 Northwest 39th Expressway. Call 405-633-7778, and remember that you can take that sunshine with you thanks to their drive-through lane. Aloha Shaved Ice and Coffee Shop, 8000 Northwest 39th Expressway. 405-633-7778. Need more money? Then save more money at Nimini Auto Group, 5951 Northwest 39th Expressway in Bethany. Nimini Auto Group is where your budget meets the open road, with high-quality used vehicles at prices that won't break the bank. Step into a world of automotive wonder with many different makes and models, as well as flexible financing options, all supported by our friendly and helpful staff. Got a trade-in you want valued, or looking to browse the lot yourself? Call 405-470-0141. Let's find your next ride at Nimini Auto today. Stop by 5951 Northwest 39th Expressway, 405-470-0141. Tired of getting gouged by overpriced department or public laundry facilities? Us too. That's why we stop by Essential Laundry Express in OKC, 7936 North MacArthur Boulevard. Open daily from 8 to 8, Essential Laundry offers pickup, delivery, self-serve services, alongside washing, drying, and folding services to boot. Locally owned and operated, Essential Laundry takes exceptional care of your clothes. It even offers added perks like a kids corner and value add centers that make it the essential laundry center for express services. Essential Laundry Express, 405-449-3610.
Eris Lunara Med Spa and Aesthetics at 800 South Garth Brooks Boulevard, Suite 100 utilizes cutting-edge technology and personalized treatment plans centered around your goals, your comfort, and your natural beauty. Experience a range of services from IV therapy, Sculptra, acne treatments, and much more. With state-of-the-art machines like the T-Shape 2, Eris Lunara offers non-invasive, proven, and natural solutions for healthier skin that will have you feeling exquisite and rejuvenated. Other services like platelet-rich plasma therapy and peptide therapy not only enhance your natural features, but promote recovery and health at all levels. Call 405-563-1255 or stop by 800 South Garth Brooks Boulevard, Suite 100 to find out about what Eris Lunara Med Spa and Aesthetics can do for you. Remember, call 405-563-1255 today.
We are at C&J Sporting Goods, and we are talking about what do you do when you're a first-time renter and you're getting, graduate going out to get your first place, and some of the tips that you should have learned already, but things that, that really will bode you well if you remember them now. And with all the graduations coming up, that's some things that are really important that landlords can really be benefited by every year. You get this new group of people coming out of high school or college that if you are accommodating to them and you teach them well, then maybe they will make good tenants moving forward. And we were talking before the break about, your loud music and things like that. One of the things that you need to remember is, as a tenant, the people in the office, the maintenance personnel, your landlord, knowing them and being nice to them and not screaming at them and giving them a lot of problems will bring you more benefits than you can imagine. Because the tenant that comes in screaming at the manager about whatever their issue is, we have an issue today with a tenant, her sewer line's backed up. Same thing happened to her a few weeks ago because she's pouring these things down the drains and grease and potatoes and all the things that she's not supposed to. And you counsel with them, and then you call the plumber, which plumbers are not cheap. The plumber shows up, she's gone. She won't let you into the apartment because her younger kid is there, so the plumber cannot go in. And then she wants to scream at you about not giving her enough notice that you had already called the plumber and what time they were going to be there. So that person will be the one that come time for renewal, that manager is going to remember those things, and they may not renew them. Sometimes being quiet and respectful and polite will get you a renewal, and being the same way with your neighbors, less complaints causes you less grief in the long run. So you need to think about that while you're doing your renting. Another thing that you need to think about, you're friendly, you're happy, you're not that homebody, you really have, got an outgoing personality, and you've got your first place, and you're just all excited, and you might be living in an apartment, or you might be living in a house where you're meeting some new neighbors, especially if you're meeting new neighbors. You don't know these people. They don't know you. They may not have your best interest at heart. One of the things that you need to think about is the people that live next door and above and around you, they see you come and go, and they know your activities, they know your schedule, they know what car you drive. They get to know a lot about you if they're observant or if they have an intention to do bad things to you or bad things to your apartment. So it is your responsibility to safeguard yourself. Don't invite people over to your apartment that you do not know. Having someone come into your apartment and seeing that you have a $3,000 stereo and nice things may not be a good idea because you just don't know that. You also need to be careful about, you've got friends and buddies and all the high school kids that you went to school with. Somebody calls, they need a place to crash for the night or the week or the month. Then that day turns into 2 days and 3 days, and then that is the month. You need to be careful who you let stay overnight in your apartment because you're responsible, and there's a thing in your lease that you didn't read that your landlord was pushing you to read that says that you cannot have unauthorized persons, and that is a breach of your lease. And you're allowed to have guests, and you're allowed to have guests stay, but they cannot stay indefinitely. You need to also be careful who has access to your keys, because they can make a spare key and come and wipe you out when you're at work, or do harmful things to you. So you need to think about who you open yourself up to. Suddenly there's property damages, there's people, you wake up in the middle of the night and there's somebody sitting on your couch or things like that. You just need to be very careful because a lot of these things do happen in neighborhoods where there's a lot of bad things that happen, but it happens more in apartment communities because of the density, and there's more incidents and more reports of things because of the density. So you have to be really, really, really careful about that. One of the biggest things that becomes a fatal mistake to you as you're out on this journey and becoming a young adult is trying to look successful before you actually are, trying to impress your neighbors, or trying to impress your high school friends that they're still stuck at home with mom and dad, and you've got your own place, and you want to be the big dog of the group, and so you're really gloating and having this fun with this apartment, and they can cause you a lot of grief. One of the things that you really need to think about before you get too far into this is, the expensive furniture, the giant TVs, all of the designer items and things like that you can't afford and pay the rent too, because what's one more payment, you know? Think about those things while you're looking at your budget, but also think about this. If something happens and you have to move, maybe you didn't pay your rent and you're being evicted. If you go through the eviction process where the landlord said, hey, pay your rent, you didn't pay your rent, then they gave you a notice and you didn't pay your rent still, and then they gave you a summons, and then now you're in court. Well, after you go to court, you'll talk to the judge, and the judge will send the sheriff out. Actually, they'll file some documents and pay some money, and then the sheriff will come out, and he'll post something on your door that says, you have 48 hours, and you don't own a truck. You drive a Honda Hot Rod. So all that big furniture that you were gloating and buying and being fancy about, you're now either going to have to go rent a U-Haul, or you're going to have to find a friend with a truck, and you're going to have to expect all your high school buddies to come move you. Nothing gets thinner and disappears quicker than high school buddies when you need to move, especially if you need to move in a hurry. So you need to think about that. You know, one of the things that maybe coming out of high school, you think that all of these things show importance and show success, but really what success is stability, peace, discipline, savings, definitely savings, and freedom. Nobody needs to know what's in your bank account. Nobody needs to know a lot of things about you that you really don't want to share, but you just do it because you don't really know better. Things that you need to learn when you get your first apartment is you need to understand the difference between wants and needs. And anybody coming out of high school or coming out of college should learn real quick or sit down and study and think about the difference between wants and needs. Food is a need. Transportation is a need. Utilities, medicine, rent, all of those are needs. Wants are that new outfit, that new purse, that new pair of shoes, that DoorDash every night, those expensive new phones, you know, those gaming things that you keep putting on your credit card, subscriptions that you don't use. All of those things that are small spending habits that you don't think are very big by themselves, you know, a $20 a day thing that you're buying on Facebook or off your gaming platform becomes $7,000 a year. So if you're making $25,000 a year, that's not in your budget. So you need to think about that. Discipline yourself early to learn to pay for your needs and get your wants later. So that's just something that's very important. One of the things that you really need to think about, you need to get in the mindset of building a future, not just a lifestyle. Because, you know, you're young now. You're 18 years old, 19 years old. When we're all 18 years old, we're all full of ourselves, number one, but we're not thinking about what are we going to do when we're 70 and thinking about, you know, what kind of car we want to drive when we're 70 versus what kind of car we want to drive now. You're not thinking about what kind of medicine you're going to need when you're 70. You're not going to think about, you know, what kind of medical issues that can come up in your 40s, 50s, and 60s. So start thinking about that and wrapping your brain around that a little bit now. Some of the stepping stones that you need to build your future, not just a lifestyle, are surrounded with building your credit, saving money, gaining experience and maybe some positive experiences, being disciplined, and being creatively stable. You know, it's not really a goal in anyone's life just to survive payday to payday to payday. But that's where a lot of people find themselves, especially when they're younger. And in your middle 40s, you find yourself living payday to payday. And if you have a payday to payday lifestyle and have some health issue or a car issue, and maybe you can't get to work for a week, there's a snowstorm, that payday doesn't come next time. So how is that going to help you live if you miss a payday? You know, that's just really important in life. You know, someday you might want to stop renting. You may want to buy a home. If you haven't been building on your credit and saving for that down payment, then you're not going to have the money to do so. So if you're leaving high school now and you're going to be a first-time renter, do the things that you need to do to be a responsible renter and get everything in order and keep them in order, because, you know, there's some things that are very important, and moving into your first apartment is not just about independence. It's about becoming the kind of adult that you want to be and stepping into life, and this is a new chapter in your life. Please try to make it a good chapter in your life, and don't let it be that beginning of your nightmare, that book that you don't want it to read like. You want it to read like a good book, not a bad book. So think about those, and we're done for the day.